All right, thanks everyone. And thanks for all the lovely introduction. I always hear you get kind of these great listings like this of accomplishments and how good, and then you have to live up to it. That's always the harder part. You like getting the introduction part, but whew, it can be something else. Okay, so what I wanted to talk about tonight is science and art and what we do, because a lot of times we're told, oh, you're such Renaissance people, you're doing art and you're doing science, and it's like, whoa, whoa, whoa. I promise you we are not doing science. It might look like it, and we have stuff that's associated with science, but anything we're doing is probably not science. So that's where I'm going to hopefully get to. And I wanted to start with just kind of talking a bit how we work. And when Critical Art Ensemble first started off, it was during the first big revolution, right? It was just at that time when we were all able to get personal computers, and shortly after that, the internet, the web went online in '93, and for the longest time, you know, like that kind of 10-year period or so, we were very, very interested in what could be done in terms of politics with this new media that was out there. And it fascinated us for a while, and we worked away, and we were particularly interested in the relationship of digital technology to the body. But we got to a certain point of it where, I don't know, we got too well known for it or whatever, and we felt like we were kind of getting pigeonholed into this box, and we were like this particular generation of cyber artists, and that kind of bothered us. But at the same time this was happening, we were getting kind of more and more communiques from the second revolution, which had been going on quite a while, but nobody was really paying attention to it. It wasn't the one that really affects our everyday life like computers did. Right? Computers and the internet, that's every day. It's kind of very hands-on. It's almost mundane and routinized by this point. But we were starting to get communiques that there was another thing happening, right? That there was the second revolution, that there was, in fact, a biological revolution that was going on with the invention of, well, or the emergence of molecular and synthetic biology. And it was kind of news to us. And as we started thinking about it, we thought, well, I guess, you know, computers and the internet, it was a pretty important thing. And, you know, when you think about the kind of globalization that we have today, could never have occurred without this incredible technological apparatus that allowed for that kind of social and economic organization. It's amazing, but it's really just a question of scale. That what was going on with this new technology wasn't all that different from the technologies we already had, right? That it was kind of an envelopment of sorts in which information was coming at us, and Lord knows we're going to internalize some of it no matter what. And then there was some that we could maybe fight our ways and be selective about what we internalize and how that shaped our behaviors and shaped our relationships. But what we always thought was just couldn't be violated was the inner being. That there was some kind of biological predisposition that could not really be messed with, that we could be enveloped all we wanted whether by any type of virtuality, but there would be an internal element that at least would still be autonomous in some way, say in the generation of desire, for example. Right? That it would always have some level of autonomy, that yes, it could be impacted from the outside. When the second revolution came, and we finally figured out, oh, this one's actually really different. This is really, because this is not more of the same. This is something genuinely new. This is not just a question of scale, because so many of those things that we thought could not be violated, that could not be manipulated or engineered or rationalized, that in fact, the knowledge systems and the technologies were being put together to make that possible. That you could begin the engineering of creating a predisposition at a physiological level that could actually link to the directives that were coming in. And once we thought about that, it was like, we have really got to change what we're doing. And it started a period between 1997 to 2007 where we really dedicated a lot of our time, not all of it, but a very good chunk of our time into trying to figure this out, right? That how was this kind of new knowledge systems that could have this effect down the road, how is it that it was going to be deployed into the social sphere? So that really became our point of intervention, right? A lot of people say, oh, they intervene in science. Not really. You know, the scientists do what they do, and God bless them, they should do what they do. We kind of are very much supporters of an anarchistic style where science goes where the knowledge is leading them, even though we know there's funding trends and all kinds of economic pressures that push them in different directions. But ideally, what we would like is let science go. But the knowledge that comes out, the technology that comes out, then the question is, how is that going to be deployed? And what kind of social relationships is it going to create? And that became our point of intervention, that's what we were really interested in looking at. And as I said, spent quite a while on it. So the first project that we ever did, and obviously it was an easy jump because if indeed we are already interested in the relationship of the body to technology, it was easy to go to this first place, and that was assisted reproductive technology. And this was one of the first project, Flesh Machine, that we toured around for a while. And it was of interest to us because we started looking back at old school eugenics and how it was being remade. It's, you know, because we kind of think like eugenics, the discourse kind of dropped off after World War II. It was disgraced. No one really talked about it again. And indeed, that's true. But that generation at the very end of World War II, they were a smart bunch of guys. And they had some predictions about the world that actually proved rather interesting. And one of the guys we found most interesting was this retired Army general named Frederick Osborne. And what he said was this. He said, look, the negative eugenics we did in the past, that was a bad idea. We did this all wrong, right? You don't want to, what you want to do is you just want it to be a byproduct of everyday life. That it should be a relationship of engineering the body that no one thinks about because it just happens. Because it's going to be a byproduct of capitalism and rational economy. Now, why did he think this? Why did he think this would happen? The reason he thought it was for a couple of reasons. One was he was seeing the change in the structure of the family. He was watching how there was this movement from extended families down into nuclear families. And he thought the more we move into nuclear, the better. Right? The old philosophy of the extended family and kids, right? It was like, well, you're going to have a bunch of kids, and you know, this one went off to college and was a doctor. This one stayed home on the farm. These three died in childhood. Little Billy, we keep him up in the attic, and you know, it was okay. Whatever it was fine. But he was like, there's going to be a new anxiety that as there's just going to be one kid, two kids. Is it going to be the doctor or not? Is it going to be the one that is going to advance family prestige? Is it going to live up to kind of that American idea that my child should do better than I did? That this becomes a real social anxiety and a real value on top of it. So step one. Step two, he said, the other thing is now we are at a point where capitalism can commodify anything. And it can commodify medicine. And it can commodify any part of medicine, which means it can commodify things like reproduction, which it's very successfully done. The clinics are everywhere now. He's like, once people are used to the idea that it's just another commodity, like going to buy shoes, right? Or going to buy an iPod or buying music or whatever else, going and buying services for reproduction, it'll just be another boring, habitual thing that no one's going to say anything about. He's like, so if that's indeed the case, and if we put it together with that social anxiety, where people are nervous and want to give their kid every possible advantage so that they can win in the competition of the marketplace, They're going to have no choice but to come to these sites of engineering. That was the future he saw. He wasn't that far off. And that's what got us really interested in all of this. It was like, ooh, okay. And one of the first things we did was to start looking at tests to get donors for either egg or sperm donors, and to see what these told us, right? Because these are supposed to be objective scientific documents. If any of you have ever taken one before, know they're anything but that. They're crazy documents. And that's kind of what we started with people here, is when they came to our performance, the first thing we do would guide them in and say, you need to take one of these tests. So they would go to our website, which had lots of interesting information on them. And we did want their DNA. That was not a lie. Okay, and so here is an actual test we got from a clinic. And I mean, you don't have to look at this, but for a second, and you can see this really doesn't have a lot to do with medicine. This has to do with a different kind of ideology. Weight at age 25, hair color, hair type, present hair loss. I mean, if ever there is an aesthetic statement built into that, I don't know what that has to do with anything, why you have to worry about it. And of course, the usuals here: eye color, skin color, race, occupation, and education. What are we selling? Right? We're not just selling a procedure here. You know, we're not just selling, here's a way that you too can have a child. We're selling more than that. A couple of things. One is kind of an ideology, because it has to for the market, of hardcore genetic determinism, which is kind of crazy. But we're selling something else in these. And the further you kind of get down the test, list any interests, special hobbies, what describes you at age 20, musical ability, skills in the fine arts. We actually, as we were looking into different clinics, we actually found one clinic that part of their guarantee of quality is they had no artists for donors, right? The kooky gene was dying with them, right? But you know, what do these things? Manual dexterity, temper, your physical stamina and physical activity, intelligence. What does any of this have to do with anything, right? I mean, these are all sales pitches, every single one of them. These are all values of the capitalist system, of how you can be a better worker. This is going to make you a better worker. If we get the right genetic predisposition, you're going to map into this environment far, far better. That's the other thing that's being sold, right? That's what makes their product so valuable, in addition to you get to be parents. And so it's it's rather crazy stuff, and you can see now here you get into kind of more what you would think as you look through it. But even in these long lists, like, here's something to tip you off of who they think the clientele is going to be. Any coffee-colored spots on the skin? About the size of a nickel. I mean, what does that indicate to us? Homosexual tendency. I'm not even sure I know what that is. And why it is on the list of pathologies, I definitely do not know. Right? And I know it's not a conspiracy, that there aren't doctors sitting there in the back room with big cigars going, we're going to create the master race. Right? I know that's not happening or anything. But when I see homosexual tendency in between brain defect and exposure to mutagenic agents, I got to wonder about it. I got to wonder a little bit. So if you were really good at it and managed to make it through the test, and you would get a certificate of generic merit at the end. It was tough. It's a tough test to get through. We did write a script. We let the computer grade it, which is not how it would be done in a fertility clinic. But we had to do some shortcuts. But I think we got pretty reasonable results of how a test would go. And of course, if you didn't pass, you were rejected outright and told that you probably shouldn't reproduce, at least not in this flesh market. I can also add that all of the Critical Art Ensemble members, we all failed. So we will not be reproducing anytime soon, at least on the market of it all. So if they got through that, part and they did get a test of generic merit, we could begin the process of a kind of separation. And it was really funny because even though people knew that this was just a performance and that it was completely artificial, there was still kind of a weird feeling of people being upset when they got put into "you're rejected," right? That they weren't going to go to the next scale. Now, people who are accepted, like this woman, we would take their blood, and this was the first time where we were starting with the ideas that there should be public laboratories, that they really needed to be out and on site. And I was speaking about this a little in Rachel's class. Look at the age of that thermocycler. You don't see ones like that anymore. Actually, that dates it of how far back we were doing this. That we needed to get this out, and as Rachel said in her introduction, to start this kind of demystification process, because, I mean, the public relation to laboratory activity, I mean, it's completely structured around Hollywood, and the vision, and I include myself in this before doing this research of, you know, what scientists are doing is like right out of a Hollywood movie, and when you look at those movie sets, I mean, it looks like someone from doing nightclub design made these laboratories. You know, they've got the overlights and backlighting and everything's lit and smoke's coming out of stuff and hydraulic things moving around. And yeah, boy, it's really not like that. I mean, if ever there was something that was the opposite, it was on, you know, definitely made on opposite day. That's what we finally figured out. And so it was a way that here we could get these things on site, let people see how it really goes, and to get it, you know, to get an idea of what's going on. Because one of the underlying things that goes with all our projects is we're really interested is if there is going to be some kind of democratic response to how these technologies, whatever they might be, doesn't necessarily mean this, to how these technologies are going to be deployed and the products they produced, how those are going to be deployed. If there is going to be any kind of democracy to that, people have to know what's going on and not just be living in this fantasy of what they believe to be going on. And that work is not getting done. And so this is why this intervention and why we spent 10 years on it, of trying to set some kind of example to begin that work. And happily now, I'm glad to say that there are public labs, that there are universities sponsoring it, and independent organizations and amateur organizations, that it's not necessarily just a voice in the wilderness, that these things can come out into the open, and that those who are maybe not trained as a specialist can still get a non-fantasy idea of what's actually going on. So we would take samples from them, we cryopreserve stuff, and we'd amplify DNA so that folks could see it, and just try and give them a sense of what actually happens. But most of all, it was to create this kind of separation, to say, look what these engines will do if they kind of remain unchecked, is that they will create a market separation between people, and as if we don't have enough separations already. Right? To make kind of, at the genetic level, another basis for separation and alienation. So that got us going. Now, which to choose next? This is a project that got us in a lot of trouble. Because one of the things that we found, particularly when we first started doing it, is authority really did not like non-specialists investigating it. We found out very quickly that there's actually a lot of investment in making sure the public remains ignorant of these issues, right? Because the more you keep them ignorant, the less input they have about them. And the more various companies and multinationals can just go ahead and deploy however they want without any kind of pushback or without any kind of regulation. Right? This one, molecular invasion, this was where we tried to find a biochemical means of intervening in Monsanto's most profitable product, Roundup Ready. Right? It's not that we hated Roundup, because Monsanto has way meaner and uglier products than this, but it was because it was their most profitable one. It's a good way to get attention. Right? And is there any way to brighten that image at all? For us, there was a problem, because we had what we thought was the right idea. And we thought if we could demonstrate it publicly, again, doing public experiments, and this is, I don't know how much that helped. And, again, this is maybe the closest we ever came to doing anything scientific, except for the hard scientific part, which we did not do. We thought we could probably find some kind of biochemical material that would attack the plant at the transgenic gene, right? So what we were thinking is what they had done is that we could take a trait of adaptability and turn that trait into a trait of susceptibility. So that which was supposed to make the plant strong, this bacteria gene they put into it, would actually be our point of attack and would make it weaker and wouldn't harm the other plants that didn't have that particular gene. Now, the question obviously is, so how did you figure out what to do? And the answer is, and this is, again, why I say it might look like science, and we might call it a public experiment. This had control groups and everything. We were kind of following the method. But when you say, what would really be the science behind it? The real science would be finding what that biochemical reaction is. And none of us had any clue how to do that. But this is where a humanities degree pays off. We do know how to do research on databases. And we did know where to look because we figured, who would be the best person to know that? Monsanto. And when they patented these, they had to put their information, make it available. So we could go through their databases and find out where they had been testing to see what would go wrong with it. And that's when we came up with pyridoxal 5-phosphate, which they believed could, when kind of hit with sunshine and the Monsanto herbicide, did not do the plants any good. And we seemed to find out that they were right. So we didn't really do the scientific part, but we performed it. We performed the public experiment. This is at the Corcoran in Washington, D.C. We did it on a very public stage, a big a one as we could get. And at the same time, the other show that was going on was Jackie Kennedy's gowns. So this is going on in one gallery, and Jackie Kennedy's on in the other.
Could you just back up and explain what Roundup Ready is?
Oh, what Roundup Ready is? Oh, Roundup Ready was, Monsanto sold it as a way to cut down on the use of pesticides. And it was a transgenic plant that had been modified to fight the active chemical, to ignore the active chemical in the herbicide. And so instead of using a poison, it was a way of attacking the plant's manufacture of aromatic amino acids, right? And so, that's how it functioned. And when you bought the seeds, you also got to buy the herbicide with it. So it was this whole package deal. And Monsanto did very well with it because, it worked as they said it would work. So that's why it was interesting for us to try and do something with it, because it was, kind of their model product and the one that they like to try and present themselves as being this very green company because they lowered the toxicity level on herbicides. Is that good enough on what it is? Okay, so we're out there doing our experiment, and the important part to us is, right, we advertise it to all the press and say, here's what we're doing, great. And our main hope was that we would catch the attention of other people who could do it better than us. That we would put the model out there and say, look, here's the idea, here's the model. Those of you that can really work it and that really have real resources, this would be like a very helpful amateur product. Because at the time this was going on, and particularly in Canada, this is when the pollen from these genetically modified plants was blowing all around, and it was mixing in with organic farmers' plants and with traditional farmers' plants and messing up their seed banks, and Monsanto would sue them for patent infringement. It was really out of control. And so we thought, if this P5P works, you could do the same thing. It's like, I was just spreading it around. It's not my fault if it blew over onto your property where your test field was. Well, needless to say, no one appreciated this project on the side of law and order. The first thing that happened, like Monsanto sent like a dozen lawyers. They just came in. It was like, I had stomped on an angry anthill and they're all coming out. And it was the same with these lawyers. They were waving around cease and desist orders and threatening to sue. And like this project had to be taken down immediately and that we were in patent violation, which clearly we were. That was true. At least that part. You're not. So we weren't licensed to grow any of it. So I suppose they had a case to make there. The way we got the seeds is we went out to kind of the Midwest where the big feeds, and we just went around the feed stores and said, hey, will you sell us some Monsanto Roundup Ready crops? We need some soy and we need some corn and everywhere, of course, would say no because, you're not licensed to do it. And we're like, well, we just need a little bit. And finally, we got to one store, and they were like, no, we can't sell you that. But some packages got busted open, and they're out in the dumpster, wink, wink. And so we go out to dumpster dive them, and that's how we got all our seeds. So it would have been very interesting to see that court case. It would have been a great art piece if they had sued us. It would have, because if you dumpster dive something, if something's in the trash, then it's supposedly property you can take. But it's still kind of protected property. So I don't know how the courts would have worked through that. Probably they usually, at least these days, stand up for property first. But it would still been an interesting case. Anyway, I have to my salute to the curator who did not buckle. And we certainly weren't going to buckle. We were like, sue us. You guys already have such publicity problems of your own. That's the next thing you knew is sue Jackie Kennedy's gowns. We double dogged there, Come on, let's see you do that. I mean, and when we didn't fold, they didn't do anything. They backed off on that. However, years later, we had some problems with the FBI, and and they were not at all happy about this project either. That was definitely going to be used in the court case against yours truly here as dangerous stuff that we were doing. All right, free-range grain. Here we go. So here, this really looks like science, doesn't it? And here we are back in the public lab again, of asking people to go ahead and bring in the grains they would like tested. And we went around Europe testing food. Now, why would we do that? We had other questions on our minds, very abstract ones of political economy in relationship to food production and distribution. Now, one of the problems that we endlessly have, particularly when we do this science stuff, is that people find it really boring. And they don't really want to talk about it, and they don't see how they have a stake in it. If we went out right now and said, hey, stop, I need to talk to you about some transgenic plants. It'd be like, come on, I've got something better to do than that, I'm sure. And so how do we get them to have a stake? And one of the easiest ways is just to connect it to something they do every day, in this case, eat and to their food. So most people have that, all people have that connection, whether they'll follow it up another thing, but generally it seemed true. So this is again where say, are we really doing science here? No. We've just really appropriated a procedure that has the appearance of science and are kind of perverting it to our own ends so that we can have a different kind of dialogue, right? As those of you who have ever done any kind of these testing of this sort, it's not really hard to do, right? It looks really hard. People come in and go, wow, this is amazing. It's like, no, not really. Really, it's kind of tedious, and it's like following a recipe. It's for something complicated. We were using kits. Everything's been optimized. It's made so anybody can do it. And where we got that idea was when at a Human Genome Center at the University of Washington. And I'm walking through the laboratory, and I saw a piece of equipment. I wasn't familiar with what it was, and there was a guy in a white coat, so I thought he must be a scientist and smart and stuff. And I asked him, do you know what this piece of equipment is? And he goes, don't ask me, dude, I'm a political science major. And I'm like, oh, I've been so bamboozled. Here I am thinking it's a Human Genome Project, it's going to be these brilliant scientists doing all this work. It wasn't brilliant science, it was work study people, right? It's like, oh, okay. That means if they can do it, I can do it. And so that it opened up a whole new world for us of like, hey, and then we started finding about these kits and looking at the instructions, and it's like, all right, we can do this. So it made us easier to appropriate stuff, and it's just not that hard to do. So we go around and are testing food. Now, why? What are we really wanting to talk about? What we're wanting to talk about is two things. One, can there really ever be proper regulation and oversight over these massive amounts of food that are trading and being shipped around every year? That we were really skeptical of. That, the commodity knows no borders. And why do we believe that there are borders? So it was kind of a conceptual border dissolve piece. And then the second project was we wanted to talk to people about why or what will the world look like, I guess is a better way to put it, once a handful of transnational companies control food production and its distribution. Right? And we've already seen some of the things that they can do by way of Africa and India and so on. Right? We already know how ugly this can get, and it's only going to get worse. What will that look like? And by starting with the food, because people would start with an issue of health, which I don't really see any evidence to say that, if you eat your genetically modified cornflakes every morning, something bad's going to happen. It hasn't happened yet, and Lord knows, at least as Americans, we're all human guinea pigs in that particular sense. But this other issue, this issue of political economy, we found to be pressing and something to think about, and something that people did have a stake in, and that a different kind of policy rather than the one of that we kind of have now. If the biotech companies do something bad, then they'll fix it. that didn't seem like a good political policy to us at all. So just by way of perhaps solving some curiosity questions, we did get a very mixed range of results. And remember, there's no control group in this. This is all just totally impressionistic random data. When we were in Holland, they were clean. We never found a thing. If it said there's no GMO in it, there was no GMO in it. It was like their labeling, top rate. In Germany, when we got there and started doing it, it was about 50-50. Sometimes there was contamination, sometimes there wasn't. And then we finally got to Austria. And those of you familiar with Austrian culture, they are very, very proud of their food culture. And they have been the most militant about no genetically modified food in our country. In Austria, you will never see it. Everything we tested contaminated. So and then it was like, we should make a scandal. But we refrained from doing it because we were already in enough trouble in Austria from when we did from when we did Flesh Machine, because the Catholic Church went mental, and they were, protesting outside our show, and the Archbishop of Salzburg challenged me to a televised debate, and which incidentally, a lot of students in the audience, so I have a tip for you. If you're challenged to a debate and you don't speak the language, don't do it. All right? You're at a sizable disadvantage. But I went on and did this. Okay, and so we were like, all right, let's not be chased out of Austria again like we were the last time we were there. We'll try and chill out and not make a huge scandal. Just go ahead and report the results as it happened. Now, this was also the laboratory that the FBI found and accused me of. Obviously, I was a terrorist if I had this stuff. And you can see it's like a PCR, got some pipettes, got a shaker, some little mini electrophoresis equipment. It's ridiculous. But they didn't know what they were looking at. And I think they're trying to fix that image. When I had to go into primary interrogation with the Joint Terrorism Task Force, and I go in, and the guy, it was in a hotel, and the guy, because they couldn't, I was kidnapped, they couldn't arrest me, because if they arrested me, they had to charge me, and they just wanted to detain me. And so I go into his hotel room, and it's, like I said, this is the guy that's running the bioterrorism unit. First bad sign, he's reading the Bible. I was like, oh God, this is going to be someone that is going to be very science positive, I'm sure. And he gets up, and at the end I was like, look, what can possibly be the problem? You can see what I've got, right? A centrifuge, a PCR, a shaker. What? He's like, whoa, Einstein. I don't know what any of that stuff is. It's like, you're the head of the bloody bio task force. You don't know what any of this stuff is? I was like, I am so going to jail. It's just like, I thought there was going to be an easy, like, oh, this is a mistake. Wrong. And they had considerable amounts of problems with that. Okay, another experiment that we tried. Oh, wait. Was during that same period, we had, you can kind of see where we went. We kind of went into the reproduction area, and then we were in transgenics for a while. I might go back to that if we have time. And then we moved into the warfare area, which is another good way to get in trouble. If you're not, the FBI really doesn't like people talking any kind of anti-war rhetoric and demonstrating things. And in this particular case was discussion of germ warfare. And what we found in our research was this was like a pretty thoroughly discredited program, that there wasn't really any military function to it. And it's not like they didn't try. They really thought there could be a biological division to the military, and it would be awesome. And it just did not work out. Everyone that tried it, whether it was the Japanese or the British or the US or whomever, could never find a kind of weaponry that you could optimize, that you could control. It was just this uncontrollable thing. You never knew what was going to happen with it. Completely unreliable in the results. And so it was just like, yeah, a weapon you can't control, that cannot be a good idea. And so Nixon, of all people, in science, that's where we finally get the Geneva Protocol, and it's going to all go away. So, at least so we thought. The United States actually getting rid of weapons system, it was a miracle. Although the reason he did it was because he knew it was such a useless weapon, and he kind of needed a little cred after the Vietnam problem. So, and it's an election year, so this was kind of like a good political statement to make. But lo and behold, 2 2003 comes along, George Bush, and George also never met a weapon he didn't like, and all of a sudden we have a germ warfare program again. It's like, damn it. How could another war crime? So we just thought, well, what can we possibly do that will represent to people in some physical way what craziness this is? Because it sounds so good, right? All of us have a relationship to being sick, and it's unpleasant, and and it can lead to dying. So you can make a lot of hay with it, right? That you can really create a kind of scary spectacle and think, well, maybe we do need a germ warfare program, at least a defensive one, as if there's a defense between an offensive and defensive position, which also was known quite clearly, and the Army had even stated in the 60s. So we started going, well, let's show people the kind of thing that's going on, and we would recreate experiments that were done primarily by the British and the Americans, with the hopes of, and this is the oddest thing, of replicating a negative, of showing why it didn't work. Right? Most of the times when it's reliability study, you want to have a positive. But we were going in the opposite direction on that. And in the process, kind of showing, we hoped anyway, the really nonsensical nature of all of this. So we were asked to do it, and then Germany asked us, they were like, can you come over, and we've seen these recreations you've been doing, can you come do one here? And our answer was, it'll be difficult because Germany never did any of these things, right? Hitler was a rocket guy. He was not big on the germs. He didn't like germs. He was kind of afraid of them. So he, more than once, wrote directives of, no germ warfare programs here. Stick with the rockets. And then after the war, clearly, there isn't going to be any kind of germ warfare program. So there wasn't one, and so it's like, well, we'll have to kind of do let's just kind of do a hybrid one of the San Francisco experiments, and we can do something similar in which we can see if we can, from a mile away, hit a proposed target with bacteria, right? And the bacteria we used was Bacillus subtilis, so a ubiquitous, harmless bacteria. And basically went about trying to recreate something like this for the Germans. And that was City Hall, incidentally. So we had to make a bunch of bacteria. That's always really easy. So here were our human guinea pig core. And that there actually was a real, they weren't called human guinea pig core, but there was actually a core of people that did that function in the 50s. They were Seventh-day Adventists, and they were on the pacifist list. And they said, look, we're pacifists, but we don't like communism either. And we're tough, and we're willing to serve our country. Is there something we can do? And our government, yeah, we got something. We got something for you. And what basically made them test subjects for the different germ weapons that they were developing. So we made our own human guinea pig core. There they are. How can you go wrong with them? Right? And of course we had to have a band, because if you're going to have a human guinea pig core, you need a band to go with it. These guys were something else. I mean, these were still, as far as they were concerned, the wall never came down. These were still hardcore East Germans, Their high school was Ho Chi Minh High School. It's like, how cool is that? It's like, you imagine that. Uh-oh, we're playing Ho Chi Minh today. This is going to be bad. It's like, and it is a digression, but I can't help but tell this story because it was so amazing. Is when we went for the rehearsal dinner to pick out the marching songs that we wanted, as we marched on our target area, which was the American consulate, to surround that. We were picking out the songs, and as we're doing it, I don't know what prompted them, but there was this old baritone player, and they were he was a Nazi. And they're looking at it, he's like, yeah, I was a Nazi. And so it's like, and and here we are deep in communist land. And so I said, well, if you were a Nazi, how come you're alive? And he said to me, he said, well, regimes come, regimes go. But I know how to drive a tank. I always have a job. I was like, all right, that explains something. So he just flipped sides and put him back in the tank. Everything was great. So here we are surrounding the American consulate with our human guinea pigs. And approximately about 1 mile away was this, the City Hall Tower, which, as you might remember, is where we started. So there it is. And so we were aiming from there to see, and how could this possibly be? I mean, how could you atomize and think, you can control them as they float around through a mile and are going to actually land in the place you think that they are going to land? Well, basically what we found out with all these experiments, I mean, they were just total failures every time we did it. We got perfect replication. So with great reliability, we can say they don't work very well. They don't work well as a ship-to-ship because we did ocean tests, we did land tests, and wherever we did them, it didn't seem to work out. So everyone, you've got to ask yourself the question being, how did we do this, right? I mean, just picture for a minute going into, let's say, the Empire State Building and saying, here's the deal. On Saturday, we need to use the observation tower, right? If you just give us some keys, we'll let ourselves in. It's going to be a bunch of guys. We're going to have some equipment with us. You might see some smoke coming off the tower. Ignore that. Just don't pay attention to it. We'll be there for maybe an hour or so, and we will let ourselves out. Oh, and by the way, could you also install some electricity up there? We're going to need power. I think that you wouldn't even get halfway through that sentence before it's like, oh, you got to call somebody? But in Germany, where I'm riding around going, that tower would be the perfect spot. Do you think City Hall? No, that's ridiculous. And the curator goes, no, let's go in and ask them. I was like, oh, God. And this is why the case is on still, right? I'm already indicted at home in bloody United States. So it's like, okay, yeah, let's go ask the officials if we can use their tower for a mock germ warfare experiment. And we did. He basically goes in there and says, hey, we have this art performance we're doing, and we're going to need to use the observation tower. Can you give us the keys? We'll let ourselves in. And also, could you put some power up there? And they went, okay. So it just shows, the U.S. paranoia happily is not the norm of the world. So we got to do it. And here's the other thing. So then, they lined up. We got to take our swabs from everybody. And then perfect cooperation from the microbiology lab at University of Leipzig, I mean, this was even, to me, in some cases, even more insane. So I've got all the samples, and I get over to the university, basically ring the bell. This lady comes out. She's never seen me before. Would you take bacteria samples from that guy? If you just ring, I got these samples. You take them. Can you tell me what's in that? And they were like, yeah, sure, we'll have the results for you in a few days. It's like, oh, thank you. So yeah, this is the kind of absurdity that we ended up dealing with quite a bit in doing these projects, and I am out of time, but there we go. There's the result. Isn't that a beauty? That's the Joint Terrorism Task Force, the FBI, and ATF raiding my house. So that's what can happen. It's happily it was all dismissed, but that's a whole other story in itself that we can't get into tonight. All I can say is when you do these things that are actually meaningful in terms of in this case, anti-war work, or in case of trying to truly set a sense of democracy and relationship to how technologies are being deployed and doing it in a very public way, you have to really expect the pushback. And it does come, it's like you have the right to free speech as long as you don't actually try it. This is kind of one of those examples of that very thing. And it's part of what is out there. But we stuck to it. And as I said, the winds seem to be shifting, that now you can do this kind of public work and the FBI won't come and arrest you, right? That we managed kind of on two fronts, one on a cultural front and one on a legal front, to kind of turn that battle. So, I just remember all of you have real agency, and what has been failing so much in science of trying to make that kind of liaison between what's going on in the laboratory to what's going on in the public sphere, and kind of erasing the fantasies, retethering again back to the real. This is something you can all do. I mean, all of us together got to work on this problem, or we're not going to have the kind of world that we want. We're going to have a place where science and technology is a completely top-down situation and the domain of multinationals and militaries. And we can't let that happen. It should be the domain of people. Thank you.